Welcome to WebRTC Live. In WebRTC Live, we cover the latest technical topics and business use cases for WebRTC and live video. As always, this episode is brought to you by WebRTC.Ventures, leading integrators of WebRTC video into your custom application.
All right, welcome back to WebRTC Live. I'm your host, Arin Sime, founder and CEO of WebRTC.Ventures. WebRTC.Ventures is a custom design and development firm specializing in live video applications, and we're here to help you take your video application live. You can learn more about us at WebRTC.Ventures. For today's episode, I'm joined by Tim Panton. Tim is founder and CTO at Pipe, that's pi.pe online. They're a technology consultancy focused on developing products for the Internet of Things. Tim previously co-founded and sold a web-based telephony business, was also, prior to that, a technical co-founder at a web security business. So his experience covers a wide range of WebRTC, telephony, security, IoT, and probably every possible interaction of those things that you can imagine. So that makes him a frequent speaker at RTC conferences where Tim, feel free to disagree with this, but I'd say you're known for fun and engaging demos in which you often battle Murphy's Law about public demos on conference Wi-Fi's. And I think today you're going to test your luck on that again with a discussion and demo around niche web applications. So welcome to the show, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always I feel that unless there's a little bit of mild peril in it, then it's not as much fun for the audience, So.
That's right. If there's not a chance of us looking ridiculous, then, we're not doing our jobs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying, I realized that I've agreed to do a WebRTC over WebRTC on WebRTC Live. So we're like 3 layers into the matrix for this. So we'll see how we go.
Right. Excellent. Well, so Tim, let's start. Tell us a little bit more about Pipe and its trust on first use model. And which I know is based on WebRTC. So maybe tell us a little bit more about that, and feel free to share your screen and start any demos you like too.
Yeah. So, I mean, just briefly worth mentioning that this started out with the idea that WebRTC security is pretty good and IoT security is pretty mediocre. And so, the aspiration was, well, hey, maybe we can do some of the things we've learned in the WebRTC and the telephony space about how to do security on small edge devices and carry it over into the IoT space. And so I spent some time kind of doing that. And what we realized is that the whole password thing doesn't work. There's no, if you've got a small device this baby monitor, for example, right? There's no way to type a password into that. It doesn't make sense. So how do you do security? What's a sensible security model? And so we kind of evolved this thing of trust on first use, as you say, which is a kind of well understood thing from the computer science, where when you first plug it in and switch it on, then that's kind of an assertion of ownership, and therefore you can claim ownership of it. So I'm going to try demoing that in case anybody hasn't seen it. Now, this is like I said, this is the kind of meta thing. So if it doesn't work, then yeah, it doesn't work. But so what we got here is this is a Raspberry Pi Zero with 2 motors and a little smiley face on it. But it has a camera on it. So what we're going to try and do is claim ownership of this device. So let me see. I'm going to share the screen. Share my application window, that one, like that. So you should have that. Now what we're going to do off screen is I'm going to find the pairing URL like this. There we go. So this is now what you would see, what you would have this URL maybe on a LCD screen on your dishwasher or on your car dash or wherever it was that you were claiming it. But for the purposes of the demo, I've got it to come up in my browser here rather than there. So now all I do is I click on this. This is just hopelessly foolish to try, but anyway, whatever. So I click on it, and with any luck, what will happen is that we'll do a full X509 PKI exchange with a Raspberry Pi Zero and we end up running the ability to run WebRTC over, actually in this case Wi-Fi, but on a Pi Zero, and you can see, well, around my messy office. I should have like brushed my desk down before I started this game. But the point there is that we've got live video there, and reasonable quality. And I'm going to put this down because otherwise you'll like get seasick. And so that's the kind of thing that we can do with this. And in order to achieve that thing, which I actually genuinely think is magic, right? The ability to kind of within a few seconds claim a good cryptographically strong ownership of a new device is actually like, that's quite hard to do.
Right.
But to get that magic to work, and I call it magic, but like, the Arthur C. Clarke quotation about like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So it's not really magic, it's just advanced technology, But to do that, what we've had to do is to squeeze a WebRTC stack onto a Raspberry Pi Zero. And to do that, we chose not to, I'm going to stop the screen share because it's like weird watching my desk. Okay. There we go. Yeah. So we had to squeeze a WebRTC stack onto a Pi Zero, and we made the decision that the stack that Google have kindly released as open source is just too big, and it's actually not focused on the right things. It wants to live on a big browser environment rather than onto a small device. And so we've kind of squeezed and wrote our own stack, which is now at the point where actually there is no code in that stack that is shared with the Google stack, or indeed anybody else's. Although I think we share a crypto library with Jitsi, but like everything else is our own stack. And that means that we can get down to about 40 megabytes. So it's a nice small footprint that we can run on the device. But in order to achieve that, what you have to do is use as much of the hardware there as possible. So like we use this actually amusingly has hardware accelerated AES encryption and hardware accelerated H.264. So like I don't have to do that on my 600 megahertz CPU. I can push it out to the hardware. And so it's about doing that, like using the resources that are available and delegating out and not trying to pull it all into the big code base. So that's what we do. The other thing that we found with this, particularly with the Pi Zeros, because the Wi-Fi chips are a bit flaky because they're basically on the same USB bus as everything else, is that you absolutely have to do congestion control. Like the video is hopeless unless you do the full suite of bandwidth management and congestion control. So we spent I spent a big part of last year implementing that, and I got quite a long way into it. And I gave a talk somewhere, and I said, this is really cool stuff and whatever. And somebody came up to me afterwards and said, you do know that your name is on the RFC for this? And I'm like, what? And it turns out that I'd made an off-the-cuff remark in the WebRTC mailing list that had like helped a little bit in the design of the congestion control that Google shipped. And they credited me in the RFC, which is like, it's only, also contributions from, but it's a really nice thing to kind of have pop up suddenly. And I was completely unaware of it. So that was like a really, really cute thing. So this is about kind of making these little devices available to like, well, basically all these smartphones that we have out there, because that's the other thing that's really changed in the last year or two, is that WebRTC actually works. You notice I'm doing this in Safari. So WebRTC actually works on the Apple platform. So like any smartphone, it'll work on. Yeah. Like it's less than 3 years old is the way I normally look at it. So that said, I'm going to do something really foolish, which is I'm going to lend you access to a, let me see, let's share the screen. Share an application window, that one. Share. So I'm going to lend you access to one of these little devices, but it's actually sitting on a track upstairs. So if I lend you this, let me just change the There we go. So if you scan that on a smartphone,
Right.
or and I haven't asked you whether it's an Apple or what.
Won't matter, right?
Right. With any luck, you should have video from that, and I can. Let me see. We can have a peek through your eyes briefly, see what you can see.
Yep. I've got video now.
So we should be seeing what you're seeing, and you can drive this thing. Maybe turn a little to the left, otherwise you'll crash into the other one. And the lighting's not ideal, but hey, this is like, motor racing is supposed to be difficult.
That's right.
So what we're going to do now, if you're up for a piece of total foolishness, is we're going to both drive around the track, because I have another one next year.
Tim, my entire life has been based on, and most of my career based on total foolishness. So this is the moment I've been waiting for.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think I'm hoping for at least like a local maximum of foolishness here.
Which side of the road are we driving on?
Oh, you have your own track. So
okay, that's good.
So you should, if you follow your line markers and I follow mine, then we shouldn't, like, there should be no opportunity for us to crash. So when you're ready, you can do a countdown and then we'll start.
All right. So I'm going to try and follow the path that I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, if you come off the track, you may struggle to get back on it, because actually the wheels on this aren't much higher than the track. So it's actually quite hard to get back on. But anyway, when you're ready.
All right, I'm ready. 3, 2, 1, go.
Now, mine unfortunately does wheelies at the slightest opportunity. So I can very easily go hideously wrong.
And I may already be off the track. Well, no, I think I'm getting back on now.
So I can actually probably come and visit you in a minute. Now, what we should have done is actually put two.
I'm stuck in a ditch already.
Okay, well, let's see if we can find you and maybe dig you out. Let's see, where are you? Oh, you're over there. Okay, yeah. Well, let's see if we can dig you out. Who knows? So I think, oh yes, it looks like you've grounded your battery there. We might be in deep trouble. Let's have a look. So yeah, you might like turning hard left. Oh no, you've got wheel spin. Let me just like, that might make things worse, or it might make things better. There we go.
Oh, that looks a little better.
So try going forwards. You see, yeah. I think we may have to give up on this as a lost cause. But it didn't fail in the way that either of us expected it to. I'm going to give one more shot at like maybe shoving you back onto the track here. No, I think that's a lost cause, or we'll have lots of little robots there soon.
Well, that's all right. We've seen.
So we've
seen the technology work.
We've done the thing. I'm like, don't get me to build a race course. Basically, is what we're saying.
Well, just don't have me race on it. My sons, if they saw this publicly terrible attempt at game playing by me, would not be surprised.
Yeah. Actually, it's one of the things I was thinking of doing, and I haven't done, but is actually inviting some kids, lockdown kids, to drive around the track, because well, why not?
Sure. So I love what you were saying, like the Arthur C. Clarke quote and about magic, and I think a lot of the discussion around video these days, and certainly when people talk about the big meeting tools like Zoom and stuff, that people are talking about security. And so now people talk about the possibility of end-to-end encryption and insertable streams, to make WebRTC truly end-to-end encrypted. All of that is an interesting discussion, but you've just showed a really powerful form of key exchange and security that does look like magic. I mean, I love that basic principle there. Proximity driven, I think, is how you refer to it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you obviously put a lot of work to get that into the Raspberry Pi, and not just for me to humiliate myself on your track, Tell me about some of the other applications where you're able to do that. Anything that you can share about your client work with that?
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why we end up using Raspberry Pis is for these sorts of demos, because then I don't have to like reveal customer hardware that they haven't shipped yet or anything like that. But
Sure.
in all honesty, what we found is, I mean, the obvious use case for this is anything like where you've got a slight security component and real-time live video on, not lightweight, but lower spec hardware. So you might think about security cameras and baby monitors and little delivery robots and that sort of thing. So those sorts of applications, like kind of anything where you want to remotely control a camera, basically, is relevant for this. I mean, although it doesn't have to be, and this is kind of weird, but it actually doesn't have to be video. Whilst WebRTC is like dominantly about video, what that actual device was doing, and maybe I should have said this earlier, is the user interface that you got, the web page that you got, actually came from the device. It didn't come from a public website.
Okay.
So what we've done is we've gone beyond just running video over it to actually proxying other things. So we can proxy web pages over it. So the device can have its own website, which you then, when you permissioned for it, we can proxy up through WebRTC into the browser, that web page, and indeed the control channels back again that you were tapping on. Those were going back down through the data channel, proxied into a little local web server on the device. So what that means is that this is also relevant for things that don't have a camera. So I actually have, for my heating in my flat in Berlin, I have remote control over it over WebRTC. I don't need the video, I don't use video, but I can proxy the web interface up to wherever I am. So there's a kind of bunch of other use cases that are non-video, but I think given where we are in the the pandemic, basically, video is so useful and so valuable that actually I've kind of diverted somewhat what I'm doing into focusing more on live video and trying to put some time into the open source community as well, so that like there are some open source applications that leverage WebRTC but aren't maybe traditional WebRTC applications. Just kind of slightly different twists on the same thing is kind of where we're looking at there.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, definitely when I think about the work that we've done in our company around IoT and WebRTC does always involve video, though we've also done some where you're doing data transfer over the data channel to maybe send some commands back and forth, but not in the way that you've done it, of having your own WebRTC stack directly on the Raspberry Pi device, which is a really efficient way to do that. But ultimately, we've still done things that did involve video on the other end. But it's a great point. We don't need video on the device itself, and what you're saying too is we also don't need the LCD screen on there in order to see the QR code and join to pair to it, because you could do that through a proxy as well. So
yeah, right. I mean, this particular one, that proxying was done over the QR code was actually a USB. So I plug into USB, so you can do proximity like with scanning, but you can also do it with cables or whatever else. But I think the other thing that I kind of wanted to bring up is when we first started doing WebRTC, we were talking about a broad range of use cases, and it seems to have narrowed down to video conferencing for business. And I kind of regret that. I've spent the last couple of months really working to try and broaden that place and in the open source space. So we've done a couple of experiments in that way. I think my favorite is really, really simple. It's basically the ability to generate a video call if you've got somebody's SMS. So if you're already in SMS contact with your your uncle or whoever, and you don't necessarily on the same social network, and you don't both have FaceTime or whatever, but you do want to video call them, which now actually happens a lot. You can send them an SMS which has one of our links in, and that link is enough to get them up into a peer-to-peer call. And what's interesting about that is, if it's peer-to-peer, we need almost no infrastructure.
Right.
Like, we need a really minimal signaling server, and that's it. Like, there's no login, there's no accounts, there's no billing, there's no, like, none of it. I don't need to do any of that. And I don't need a cloud service to like run 50,000 instances or whatever it is that Jitsi are doing these days, right? Because it's peer-to-peer. So that's kind of, that only works because the browsers in smartphones support WebRTC out of the box. So I can send you a link and you open it, and I'm like, very occasionally it doesn't work, but almost always the phone, if it's less than 3 years old, will come up in the right browser and do WebRTC perfectly. And that's just like, that is also magic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I completely agree. The support of WebRTC finally reaching the mobile browsers, and with Apple last in particular, it was a game changer for sure. Completely changes development and reduces the need for native applications, and just opens it up to so many more use cases, like doing a video call with your uncle started from SMS. There's no app download anymore, right? So that's a big deal for us as developers as well as them as users. So yeah, totally agreed. We've got a question from Alex, who wants to know what kind of motors are you using, Tim, on the Raspberry Pi robot there?
Right. So I just bought the whole kit I got from Pimoroni. I think these are is it Polu motors, but they're just brushless, little, like, very cheap. The whole thing maybe cost 40 euros or something. But there's a funny story, which is when I first I bought like 8 of these for a workshop, and somehow, and I don't know if it was my mistake or the shipping mistake, but one set of motors was 10 times faster than the others. So like, there was one team who were just Speedy Gonzalez around the track, and like, everyone was just going, how did you do that? And I actually had no idea, but it turned out that they had it's the same motor with a different gearbox on it. But no, so this kit it's called an STS Pi, and that gives you the base, the mount, the motors, the wheels, and then you just need to slot on a battery and a Raspberry Pi and the camera. And I went for Pi Zero because it's cheaper, and also because it's kind of interesting to go as far down as you can, because then like going up from there is easy.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, another interesting thing I think about what you're pointing out here is, I feel like, at least in the world that we live in and the work that we do, so much of the work in recent years has been around media servers, and so it's still very much WebRTC, but it's also a little bit different WebRTC than was originally talked about, 6, 7, 8 years ago, right? Where we were talking about completely peer-to-peer, no media servers in the middle, that sort of thing. And I think especially when you're talking typical conferencing technology and broadcasting, you start to need to get those media servers in the mix. But I like what you're talking about when we think about this in IoT and sort of from an edge computing perspective. It's kind of getting back to the basics of the way WebRTC should be used. In fact, you're kind of even doing a stripped down version of it, as I understand it, right? So I think that's a great perspective that is lost in a lot of the conversations we're in anyways.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think there's a secondary point, which is that by doing that, then you can lose some of the things that makes the web platform great. Like we did a thing for my book club. I'm in a science fiction book club, and we wanted to meet virtually. And so I thought it would be interesting to build an app for that. And I thought, well, we use Jitsi or Wire or something. And I thought, no, let's build an app. So I ended up building a conferencing app, an audio only conferencing app that runs entirely in the browser. Mm-hmm. Like, it actually does the audio mix in the browser. So there's no media server there. Well, there is. It's in Chrome. because you can use web audio to do mix. And then I found what's really lovely about that is I can mix it in the stereo space, so that I can have participants spread over the stereo space. And then what's nice, what's really, again, almost magic about that is that when somebody wants to speak and they clear their throat or they shuffle in their chair and you hear them, you hear where it came from. So without even having to recognize their voice, you can tell who it is who's itching to talk. And that was it was a really interesting experience for me. It's like building that thing. And what's great is it's infinitely scalable. Like, I don't have to run resource for it. I just need, somebody has to host a browser that's got enough bandwidth to run 9 audio calls, and that's all it takes.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting space. I think the problem is that it's not obvious how you make money out of that, which is why that's an open source thing, and the SMS video calling is also open source, because there is no easy way to extract money from it. So, and anyway, I kind of wanted to do it.
Sure, absolutely. So mentioning your science fiction book club is a good segue to, I threw a little poll out there to see what our live viewers today were interested in building between IoT and WebRTC, and the largest respondent, the winner of that poll, so to speak, is control of remote devices or robots. So maybe some competing racetracks to yours. Second leading answer, though, is a human mission to Mars. So maybe we might get a little bit of latency in that one. I threw that option in there for fun, but I think we've got some interest in it. I'm not sure how we'll make money on that one either, Tim. We might need to open source it.
Yeah, I actually did do a little. I mean, it'll need AI at the far end, and I WebRTC and AI is kind of interesting because you can use the live connection as a training source. So like you can drive it, teach it how to drive over the sands of Mars, and then once it gets there, it knows how to do it.
Sure.
So that's kind of, WebRTC and AI tend to be like seen as incompatible, but actually a lot of the time it's just another tool in the tool set, I think.
Right. Absolutely. Any, by the way, since we're probably all stuck at home in the pandemic, still any good science fiction recommendations from your book club for us? I'm looking for something else.
Well, it depends a little bit on what you're after. I think at the moment I like things that are relatively kind of far distant. So, something that. So I'm rereading Anne Leckie's ancillary series and absolutely loving them. I missed a bunch of stuff the first time through, so reading them again is great. The other thing, a book I absolutely adore, and we all, as a book club, we all loved, was A Closed and Common Orbit, Becky Chambers. It's the middle of a kind of nearly trilogy, but it reads just fine on its own, and it's a lovely book. It's lovely. It touches on AI. It touches on like a whole bunch of nice stuff, but it's actually a really interesting, beautifully written book. So we do a thing in the book club where we score the books out of something that was in the book. So we kind of pick a theme in the book and then we'll score it out of the book. And I'm actually struggling to remember what it was that we scored Closed and Common Orbit out of. But like normally it's sort of something bizarre like rabbits or robots or something. But anyway, yeah.
I'm actually reading the first book in that series right now, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
Right. That's nice. I like that. But the second one is just perfect. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it then. Not ready to read anything too dystopian. Those are, see enough of that in the real world right now. So those ones are pretty fun. So
yeah, I mean, on that, just very briefly, I do a podcast where we're trying to predict the future, and I've basically given up on it because I can't predict 5 days into the future. And so the idea of asking guests to predict 5 years into the future is just unfair. So we're kind of like putting that a little bit on the back burner while we kind of think about that, because it's strange times.
Indeed. Indeed. So we should wrap up, but I really enjoyed speaking with you, Tim, and I'll work on my driving skills for next time we speak. But anything else around your work, upcoming virtual conferences, product releases, or other items related to the pandemic you'd like to talk about or mention?
Not really. I think the only thing I would say is that, like, the meta lesson of this is that it's important that as we evolve the standards going forwards and the implementation going forwards, that we don't leave out these WebRTC use cases that are not video conferencing. Like, I sometimes think that a lot of effort has gone into making the video conferencing stuff work. And recently, for example, like the IP discovery, like who can see what your local IP address is. Actually, turns out that's a really inconvenient for peer-to-peer. Like, it doesn't make much difference. That restriction doesn't make much difference for conferencing services, but peer-to-peer, it does reduce the likelihood that you'll get a direct connection. So I wouldn't want to see a lot more of those. So it's kind of nice to get people understand that peer-to-peer is important still. Yeah, it absolutely is. And Zoom meetings are not the only thing, as you said to me prior to this. And I think you've certainly shown that today with the demo and with the work that you do at Pipe. So again, for those interested to learn more about Tim, that's pi.pe. And Tim, thanks a lot for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. Always a pleasure. And Murphy's Law worked out pretty well, I think, on the demo today. So thank you. Yeah, it crashed, but not in the way we thought it would. So.
That's right. Not a technology problem.
Right.
So thanks everyone for joining us today on WebRTC Live. We'll post this episode to WebRTC.Ventures and YouTube in the coming days. If you want to keep up with our upcoming episodes, just join our email list at WebRTC.Ventures, or you can follow us here on Big Marker or on social media at WebRTC.Ventures. And thanks everyone again for joining us. Thank you, Tim. Let's make it live.
Yeah, thank you. I caught the sun now, so it just moved around.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.Ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services, and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.